For 25 years, he cursed God, lived like a ghost, and chased away anyone who came near. Until one bold young woman walked into his haunted home and unlocked the truth that shattered everything he believed. Chinedu was 11 when his life changed forever. His parents were on their way home from a wedding when their car collided with a trailer along the Enugu Expressway. Both of them died on the spot. In a single day, Chinedu became an orphan. The weeks that followed were a blur. He remembered loud cries, strange relatives, and long church services. But what hurt more than the grief was what came next. His father's family, who barely showed up when his parents were alive, suddenly took over everything: house, land, money. They left Chinedu with nothing. It was his mother's elderly mother, Mama Ugo, who took him in. She lived in a small old mud house at the edge of their village. Life there was quiet, poor, and completely different from what he had known. There was no electricity, no running water, and barely enough food. But there was one thing in abundance: prayer. Mama Ugo was a deeply religious woman. Every morning before dawn, she would wake Chinedu up to pray. In the evenings, they would read from her old, torn Bible. At first, Chinedu hated the routine. But slowly, something started to change in him. He found comfort in the quiet moments, the songs his grandmother sang, and the way she spoke about God like he was a close friend. By the time Chinedu was in secondary school, he was already preaching to classmates. At local youth programs, he became known as Small Pastor. He would stand in the middle of the street with his Bible and speak to anyone who would listen: market women, bus drivers, children. People were drawn to him, not just because he spoke well, but because they could see he believed what he said. After finishing secondary school, Chinedu had one dream: to go to university. But Mama Ugo didn't have the money, and no one from his father's side was willing to help. So he took the only option available: learning a trade. He became an apprentice at a car repair shop owned by a man named Oga Namdi. The workshop was noisy, hot, and filled with the smell of oil and metal. Chinedu woke early, swept the floor, fetched tools, and watched carefully as his Oga worked. He was determined to learn. But even as he trained, Chinedu's heart remained in church. He was often late to work because of morning prayer meetings, and sometimes skipped work altogether to attend crusades or do street evangelism. Oga Namdi didn't like it. "If na Bible you want use open workshop, no problem," he often barked. Still, Chinedu didn't stop. He believed God would make a way. He was young, poor, and had no family to support him. But he had faith. He believed his life had meaning, that somehow things would get better. But he had no idea how dark the road ahead would become. Chinedu had never been in love before. He didn't think much about it either. Between his work at the mechanic shop, church activities, and the daily hustle to survive, love just wasn't on his mind. That changed the day he met Oluchi. She had joined the church choir after her family relocated from Abuja. She was beautiful, tall, light brown skin, always dressed modestly, and had a calmness that made her stand out. But more than her looks, it was her spirit that drew people to her. She was serious about God, but also kind and approachable. They first spoke after a midweek youth fellowship. She had seen him praying for someone outside the church and waited to thank him. "Your message touched me," she said, smiling. "You talk like someone who's seen pain, but still has hope." Chinedu wasn't sure how to respond. He wasn't used to compliments, especially not from someone like her. From that day on, they started talking more. At first, it was just after services. Then they began praying together, going for evangelism in the streets of Enugu. They laughed, argued over scriptures, and encouraged each other. It wasn't long before people started noticing how close they were. Some supported them, others whispered. The biggest problem came from Oluchi's parents. Her father was a wealthy businessman who had built a name for himself in Abuja before retiring to Enugu. Her mother ran a private school. They were respected and protective of their only daughter. When they found out she was getting close to a mechanic apprentice, they were furious. "Oluchi, are you mad?" her father asked. "What can that boy offer you? He has no degree, no future, and no class. But Oluchi stood her ground. He's a good man. He fears God. He works hard. That's what matters to me. They refused to hear it. Chinedu, heartbroken but not angry, tried to win them over. He spoke respectfully whenever they allowed him into their home, shared his dreams, and explained how he planned to grow his workshop into a business. Still, they rejected him. For over 3 years, they kept their relationship in secret or under tight conditions. They prayed, waited, fought. At times, Chinedu almost gave up, but Oluchi's steady faith kept them together. Eventually, with the help of some pastors and family elders, Oluchi's parents agreed. Reluctantly. They set strict conditions. He must take care of their daughter like a queen. In return, they would support him to get on his feet. They paid for a beautiful wedding, gave him enough capital to start his own auto repair business, and rented a furnished home for the couple. Chinedu couldn't believe it. After all the waiting, struggling, and rejection, he had everything he once prayed for: his own workshop, a beautiful wife, a home, and a growing reputation in ministry. For the first time in a long while, Chinedu felt like maybe, just maybe, life had finally turned in his favor. But peace has a way of arriving just before the storm. The early years of Chinedu and Oluchi's marriage were filled with joy. They settled into their new home, a modest but well-furnished bungalow Oluchi's parents rented for them. Chinedu's new workshop opened in town and began to attract customers. He was known for honesty, speed, and fair pricing, something rare among mechanics. In church, his reputation grew quickly. He was no longer just small pastor. He was now Pastor Chinedu, married, respected, and ordained. People came to him for prayers, advice, and help. He was the kind of pastor who would give his last money to a struggling widow, the kind who never turned down anyone in need. And Oluchi stood by him in everything. She supported the church work, helped with planning outreaches, visited the sick, and remained humble despite her family's wealth. But one thing was missing: a child. At first, it didn't bother them much. They believed it would happen soon. But after the first year, people started whispering. After the second year, the pressure grew louder. Doctors said they were both fine. But still, nothing. By the third year, fasting and prayer became routine. They visited prayer mountains, attended special programs, and sowed seeds in faith. Chinedu became more devoted to ministry, possibly as a way to drown his frustration. Oluchi, however, began to withdraw quietly. She smiled less often. She stayed indoors more. Though she never said it, she carried the weight of shame that society places on women who don't conceive. Friends began to avoid asking her questions. Some church members offered unsolicited advice. Others gave her pitying looks. By the fourth year, Oluchi's mother suggested IVF. But Chinedu refused. "God is enough," he said. By the fifth year, Chinedu was traveling constantly, preaching from state to state, sometimes gone for a week or more. His phone rang day and night. Crusades, counseling, leadership retreats. He often returned home exhausted and fell asleep as soon as he arrived. Oluchi grew lonelier. She missed her husband's presence, not just physically, but emotionally. She wanted someone to hold her, talk to her, remind her that everything would be okay. Still, she didn't complain. She prayed for strength. She cooked his meals, washed his clothes, and kept the home as peaceful as possible. Then one morning, everything changed. Oluchi threw up violently after brushing her teeth. At first, she thought it was just food poisoning, but the signs kept coming: nausea, sensitivity to smell, and a strange feeling in her stomach. A hospital test confirmed it. She was pregnant. After 5 years of tears and waiting, God had answered. Chinedu was overjoyed. He lifted her off the floor, crying and laughing at the same time. God has done it! They began planning ahead: baby names, nursery furniture, and how Chinedu would reduce his church travels to be more present at home. But as the months passed, those promises faded. He got busier than ever. And Oluchi? She grew quieter. She knew this pregnancy would test her strength more than any trial she had ever faced. The pregnancy was rough from the start. Oluchi's body ached in ways it never had before. Some days she couldn't stand without holding the wall. Her ankles swelled. Her head pounded constantly. Her vision would sometimes go blurry, and she felt tired even after hours of rest. The doctor said it was normal. Some women have harder pregnancies than others. But deep down, Oluchi didn't feel right. Chinedu was excited, no doubt. He told everyone the testimony. At crusades, he'd share how God answered after 5 long years. People clapped and cried. Some sowed seeds for their own miracle. But in their home, Oluchi rarely saw him. Chinedu's schedule became even more packed. He preached in Aba one weekend, Port Harcourt the next. He started a new prayer program online and joined a team organizing National Youth Revival. Each time he left, Oluchi would hold her belly and pray, "Lord, keep us safe." Whenever she tried to speak about how she was feeling, he'd kiss her forehead and say, "You're strong, you'll be fine. I'll be back in 2 days." But those 2 days always became 4. The 9th month arrived. Oluchi was exhausted. Her headaches had returned, her vision was worse, and she often felt like her chest was tightening. The baby was still kicking, but her body felt like it was giving up. Then came that morning. It had rained all night. Thunder shook the windows. The air was cold and heavy. Oluchi woke up to a blinding headache. Her vision was cloudy. Her feet were swollen. She tried to get up, but collapsed back into bed. She reached for her phone and called Chinedu. No answer. She called again. Still no answer. He had traveled to Nsukka for a 2-day crusade. She had begged him to stay this time. He had promised to return before the weekend. Oluchi waited for an hour, then 2, then 3. She tried calling her mother but kept hanging up. She didn't want them to worry. By evening, the pain had grown worse. Her breathing became heavy. Her hands were shaking. She called again. Still no response. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. With trembling fingers, she called her parents. Within 20 minutes, they were at the house, rushing her into the car as the rain continued pouring. At the hospital, the nurses quickly took her in. Her blood pressure had spiked dangerously high. The diagnosis came fast. Pre-eclampsia. The doctors moved swiftly. They had to deliver the baby now. There was no time to wait. But as they prepared the theater, Oluchi began to convulse. Her body jerked uncontrollably. The nurses held her down, trying to stabilize her. The baby's heartbeat was fading. They rushed her into surgery. Chinedu's phone buzzed over and over again, on silent, forgotten on the church pulpit. By the time he saw the messages and raced through the flooded streets, it was too late. She was gone. And at the hospital entrance, drenched and shaking, Oluchi's father looked him in the eyes and said, "Don't ask to see her. Go back to your church." Chinedu didn't speak on the drive home. Rain still fell heavily as he stepped out of the car, clothes soaked, shoes caked in red mud. He stood in front of the house, the one Oluchi's parents had rented for them, frozen. Inside, everything reminded him of her. Her shoes by the door, the cup on the table, her Bible on the armchair, still open to the last passage she read. He sat on the floor for hours, staring at nothing. No tears came. Not that night, not the next. People came to visit. Church members, neighbors, some pastors. He didn't open the door. He didn't return calls. He didn't return to church. For weeks, the curtain stayed drawn. The compound overgrew with weeds. His workshop shut down. His staff left, one after another. He stopped eating. He stopped bathing. He stopped praying. He sat on the same spot on the floor, day after day, replaying that moment at the hospital entrance. Oluchi's father, soaked in rain, grief in his eyes, spitting words Chinedu couldn't forget. "Go back to your church." Eventually, the whispers began. "He hasn't left his house in a month. Did you hear? He's gone mad." They said he cursed God. "He's dangerous now. Don't go near." The man who once prayed for the sick and helped the poor now yelled at anyone who mentioned God. He smashed the framed photo of his wedding, burned the books he once taught from, ripped his Bible apart. One day, a young church member tried to visit him. Chinedu chased him away with a stick, screaming, "Don't bring your lies into this house. God doesn't exist." He started drinking. When he did go out, it was only at night, walking aimlessly through Enugu streets like a ghost. His beard grew wild. His eyes, once full of light, now looked hollow and lost. People warned their children, "Don't go near that house." Some said he was cursed. Others believed he was mad. But no one knew what really tormented him. The guilt. The what-ifs ate him alive. What if he had stayed home? What if he had answered her call? What if he had listened? He couldn't stop seeing her face. Sometimes he thought he heard her calling his name in the rain. Other times, he would talk to her photo like she was still alive, and he wanted to die. But even that didn't happen. Every morning, he woke up angry to still be breathing. 25 years passed like that. The once beloved Pastor Chinedu became a man people crossed the street to avoid. His house, once a symbol of blessing, became a ruin. And still, no one dared enter. Until the day a stranger walked through his gate. Sophia arrived in Enugu at the age of 25, unaware of the storm her presence would stir. She was an orphan who had grown up in Port Harcourt with her grandparents, then studied abroad. Her grandmother would always tell her, "Focus on your future, my dear." She was soft-spoken, thoughtful, and strikingly beautiful. Her smile lit up rooms, and her quiet confidence made people take notice. She had come to Enugu for a job, and had quickly settled into a routine: work, home, and church. It didn't take long for people to notice something else: her striking resemblance to some familiar. Someone whispered after her first church service. "Oluchi?" she asked a fellow chorister. "Who's that?" The woman looked at her strangely. "A woman who died years ago. She used to worship here. You look just like her." Sophia laughed it off, but the comparisons didn't stop. The pastor called her a light. Older women looked at her with teary eyes. Even strangers in the market stared. Then one day, during a church meeting, someone mentioned Pastor Chinedu. "Don't mind that man," one man said bitterly. "He used to be fire for God. After his wife and child died, he became something else, a madman." Sophia's ears perked up. Something about the name made her stomach twist. "Who's Chinedu?" she asked later that day. A woman leaned in, lowering her voice. "He was the talk of this city before things fell apart. His story is painful. People say he cursed God and turned his back on everything. Nobody dares go near him now. His house is a wreck, and he's dangerous." That night, Sophia couldn't sleep. She went online, digging through old church archives, blogs, and Facebook posts. She found old photos of a younger Chinedu in a white suit, holding a Bible, of a smiling woman beside him, Oluchi. Sophia's breath caught in her throat. The resemblance was unsettling. She stared at the photo for hours. The next day, she called her grandmother. "Grandma, was my mother's name Oluchi?" There was silence on the line, then a soft, shaken reply. "Where did you hear that name?" "You told me she died after giving birth, but people say I look just like a woman named Oluchi, and she died 25 years ago." The line went quiet again. "I don't want to talk about it," her grandmother said. "Some things are better left in the past." But Sophia wasn't convinced. She couldn't explain it, but something deep inside her felt drawn to the name, and the story, and the man called Chinedu. Despite every warning, every voice telling her not to get involved, she made up her mind. She would find this man. She needed to see him for herself. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when Sophia finally made her move. She had asked around quietly. Most people refused to talk about Chinedu. Some warned her outright. "Don't go there, Sister Sophia," her choir leader pleaded. "That man is no longer who he used to be. He's dangerous." But Sophia couldn't shake the feeling. Something kept pulling her back to the name, to that house on the old street behind the abandoned school. So she went. Alone. The gate was rusted, barely hanging on its hinges. The compound was overgrown with weeds, cracked walls, broken windows, and silence. She hesitated for a moment, then pushed the gate open. It creaked loudly, the sound echoing through the empty street. She stepped in. The house felt abandoned, lifeless. She knocked once. No answer. She knocked again. Still nothing. She slowly turned the handle of the front door. It wasn't locked. Inside was darkness and dust. The curtains were drawn. The air was heavy, and the smell of old wood and stale alcohol filled the room. And then she saw him, sitting in the corner. A man with a wild beard, sunken eyes, and a body that looked like it hadn't moved in days. He wore a torn wrapper, his feet bare. A bottle of dry gin lay beside him. He looked up at her. Their eyes met. The bottle slipped from his hand. "Oluchi?" he whispered, voice cracked from years of silence. Sophia froze. I'm not Oluchi," she said, voice trembling. "My name is Sophia." He stared at her like he'd seen a ghost. His hands shook. He tried to stand, but his knees buckled. He grabbed the wall for support. "No," he muttered. "No. You can't be here. You're not real." "I came to talk to you," she said softly, taking a step forward. But just then, the door burst open behind her. "Sophia!" It was her grandmother. She had heard from a neighbor where Sophia had gone and had raced down the road. Her face turned pale the moment she saw Chinedu. Her legs shook. "God, no," she whispered. Chinedu turned toward her slowly, confused. "You!" Sophia looked between them, her heart racing. "What's going on?" she asked. "Why does he think I'm Oluchi? Why are you crying?" Her grandmother dropped to the ground. "I didn't want you to find out this way," she said through tears. "But the truth has caught up with me." She turned to Chinedu, voice shaking. "She's your daughter. Your baby didn't die. The doctor saved her after the surgery. But Oluchi, she didn't make it. We blamed you and didn't want you near our grandchild." The room fell silent. Sophia staggered back, breath caught in her throat. Her entire world spun. Chinedu collapsed to the floor, weeping like a wounded animal. Sophia turned and ran. Her grandmother chased after her, calling her name again and again, but the truth was already out, and nothing would ever be the same again. Chinedu didn't move from the floor for hours after Sophia and her grandmother left. His face was wet with tears, his clothes soaked with sweat. The house was completely silent, yet the echoes of Sophia's voice, her resemblance to Oluchi, and the confession from her grandma played over and over in his mind. He wanted to scream. He wanted to undo time. But all he could do was weep. He didn't sleep that night, or the next. He sat in the same corner, replaying everything. Oluchi's last days, the unanswered calls, the baby he was told had died. All the years he had cursed God, cursed people, and wasted away. The shame crushed him. Sophia, on the other hand, had locked herself inside her room for days. She ignored her grandmother's attempts to speak. Her heart was torn. The man she had visited out of compassion had turned out to be her father. A man everyone feared and called a madman. Was blood. She didn't know what to do with the anger, the confusion, the grief for the life she never got to have. And the silence between them lasted for weeks. Then, one Sunday morning, Sophia stood up, dressed quietly, and went to church. She wasn't singing. She just sat in the last row, head bowed the entire time. Just before the final prayer, she felt a presence enter the room. She looked up slowly. It was Chinedu, clean-shaven, hair cut, wearing an old white shirt. Quiet, nervous, fragile. Gasps rippled through the congregation. He walked in and sat at the very back, 2 rows behind her. Not close enough to speak, but close enough to say, "I'm trying." Sophia didn't move, but she didn't walk away either. After the service, he waited outside the gate. Not to force a conversation, just to be near. She walked past him. He didn't stop her, but just before she stepped into her ride, she turned. "You looked like the man from those old photos today." she said quietly. The one who used to believe. Chinedu nodded. His voice was low, broken. I'm sorry, Sophia. For everything. For not being there. For becoming the kind of man you had to find, instead of one who raised you. She stared at him for a long moment, then got into the car and drove away. But the wall had cracked. In the weeks that followed, she began to call. Not every day, but often enough. Chinedu began seeing a pastor for counseling. He opened the windows of his house again, began clearing out the dust, the cobwebs, the memories. He didn't preach, not yet. But he began to pray again, small, broken prayers, the kind that sound more like breathing than speaking. And for the first time in 25 years, he felt like God was listening. Months passed. The changes came slowly. But they came. Chinedu, once feared and avoided, now walked the streets quietly, greeting familiar faces who never expected to see him healed. Some still stared, unsure. Others greeted him cautiously. But the gossip eventually faded. People could see. Something had changed. He reopened his old workshop, not with grand sign or loud announcement, but with quiet hands, fixing cars like he used to. A few of his former apprentices came back. Some young boys from the neighborhood came to learn. He taught them with patience. Sophia kept her distance at first. The calls turned into visits, short ones, then longer ones. Eventually, she began dropping by the workshop with food. No words, just presence. And with each quiet moment shared, the space between father and daughter slowly filled with something new. Understanding. Chinedu never tried to take back the years. He knew he couldn't. But he did the one thing he had never done before. He listened. He listened to Sophia talk about her childhood, her dreams, the confusion she carried, growing up without answers. And she listened, too, to his regret, his guilt, his brokenness. One morning, Sophia invited him to church, not for a service, just to sit with her during choir practice. He came. He sat at the back and watched as she stood on stage, eyes closed, singing the same song Oluchi used to sing before preaching. You are Alpha and Omega. He wept quietly. Not from pain this time, but from gratitude. The kind that says, I don't deserve this, but I've been given it anyway. Chinedu was no longer the man who cursed God. He was the man who once lost everything and found something unexpected in return. A second chance. The end. Do you think Oluchi's parents were right or wrong for hiding the baby from Chinedu? What would you have done if you were Sophia, after finding out the truth? Have you ever walked away from God during pain? And what helped you come back? If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to my channel, like and share this video, and don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching.